Almost everyone has heard of the Rothschilds. Most people are familiar with them. The great banking dynasty of Europe, the family that lent money to kings and quietly shaped the outcomes of wars. But what's less known is this. At the very same time, on the other side of the world, another family was playing a remarkably similar game. And in many ways they were doing it under far harsher conditions. Their name was the Sassoons. Today, very few people recognize that name. Not because they were insignificant. Quite the opposite. If you want to understand how the modern global economy truly works, the story of the Sassoon family sits right at the center of it. Because this is not merely a story about making money, it's a story about survival, about adaptation, about the gray zone between morality and opportunity, and about the hidden mechanics behind empires. The story begins in the early 19th century in Baghdad, one of the key cities of the Ottoman Empire. David Sassoon was born there in 1792. His family was not an ordinary merchant family. For generations they had managed regional trade networks, closely intertwined with the state itself. A respected and influential Jewish family. David's father served as the treasurer to the governor of Baghdad, so from a very young age David grew up watching how money moved, how power functioned, and how influence was maintained. But empires are never stable. Power balances shift constantly. Those who are protected today can become targets tomorrow. The Sassoon family learned this the hard way. Political winds turned, pressure increased, and the ground beneath their feet began to slide. Eventually, the cost of staying became greater than the cost of leaving. In 1829, David Sassoon was forced to abandon the land of his birth. This moment was critical, because he could not take his wealth with him. He could not take his title. He could not take land or property. All he carried were his family, his faith, and the knowledge stored in his mind. In other words, the only form of capital that truly travels. His journey led him to Bombay, modern-day Mumbai, a hot, chaotic, noisy port city under British control. Not the political capital, but the lifeline of the empire. This was where British factories met Asian raw materials. For a refugee, it was intimidating, but also full of possibility. David Sassoon started from scratch. He had no formal education. He was not part of the British aristocracy, but he possessed a crucial advantage, the ability to think across cultures. He wasn't rigidly British in outlook, nor narrowly local like many traders. He saw commerce as a whole. He traded cotton, he sold yarn, he dealt in textiles. But what truly set him apart was his ability to build relationships. He worked with Jewish, Indian, Muslim, and Arab merchants alike. He spoke multiple languages. He understood cultures. He valued reputation over paperwork, trust over contracts. At the time, this approach was almost revolutionary. And then, the darker side of history enters the scene. Opium. The British East India Company was producing opium in India and selling it to China. The Chinese government had banned the trade, but addiction had already spread. Demand never disappeared. Prohibition doesn't end trade. It simply pushes it underground. A massive gray economy emerged. David Sassoon recognized the gap. Here's the key distinction. Sassoon was not selling opium on street corners. He positioned himself one step away from the dirty work. But financing, insurance, storage, and transportation, the backbone of the system, were under his control. He transformed chaos into an efficient commercial machine. Morally, this is disturbing. But let's be honest, this is how 19th century empires functioned. Sassoon didn't invent the system. He perfected it. The results came quickly: ships, warehouses, capital flows. By the 1840s, David Sassoon had become one of the most powerful traders in Asia. What's interesting is that he didn't just hoard his wealth. He made it tangible. He built factories. He financed ports. He constructed roads. He funded hospitals, schools, and synagogues. Because he understood something fundamental: money is fluid, but stone, buildings, and infrastructure endure. As the business grew, he returned to what he trusted most: family. He sent his sons across the world, one to Shanghai, one to Hong Kong, one to London. Each wasn't just a trader. Each became a point of trust. The name Sassoon turned into a guarantee. Shanghai became one of the most critical nodes in this story. By the late 19th century, the city was half Chinese, half colonial. Opium money, debt, foreign powers, total chaos. But for the Sassoons, this was the ideal environment, because uncertainty is opportunity for the right people. Even today, the foundations of Shanghai's Bund district carry Sassoon money: warehouses, banks, offices. As Shanghai transformed from a trading port into a financial center, the Sassoons financed that transformation. By the 1880s, people began calling them the Rothschilds of the East. This wasn't just a metaphor. Their strategies were the same: ignore borders, control networks, place capital ahead of politics. And in a striking irony, the family that once fled Baghdad eventually settled in London. They were knighted by Queen Victoria, accepted into the British aristocracy. The system that once excluded them now embraced them. But time moves on. In the early 20th century, the opium trade collapsed. Empires weakened. Nation-states rose. Corporations replaced family networks. Revolution in China, Japanese invasion, war. The Sassoon network fractured. There was no dramatic fall. It was quiet. Their influence slowly faded. Their name gradually disappeared. But the system remained, because the Sassoons demonstrated a timeless truth. Money doesn't need a passport. It needs connections. They pioneered an early version of what today's tech and financial giants do. They showed that markets can be conquered without conquering land, that power can be built without armies. And perhaps the most important lesson of all: intelligence may elevate you. Adaptation may keep you standing, but no network, no empire lasts forever. History doesn't remember you for how brilliant you were. It remembers you for the world you leave behind, and that world, sooner or later, demands accountability.